We all know the truth. More connects us than separates us. But in times of crisis, the wise build bridges, while the foolish build barriers.
You raise walls, I destroy them. Let's see who prevails.
Just because something works doesn't mean that it cannot be improved.
I say we take off and nuke the entire site from orbit. It's the only way to be sure.
Allow my sword to join you in the fight against evil.
The world needs us to chase dreams.
We have to dedicate ourselves each and every single day to this fight because I can't do it alone.
You, the people, have the power to create machines, the power to create happiness. You, the people, have the power to make this life free and beautiful, to make this life a wonderful adventure. Then in the name of democracy, let us all unite!
Welcome to Screen Scout, the subcast of the Skiffy and Fanty Show.
But yeah, this is the post office. We could get in real trouble.
I'm Sean.
I'm Paul.
And I'm Mike.
And obviously we are here for yet another wonderful round of a Babylon 5 rewatch. This time talking about episodes 13 through 17. And this should be really exciting because a lot of crazy stuff happened, right?
I've been curious what you would think about these episodes, especially the last two, for a long while now, Sean. Ever since season 1, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, because we're in the real stuff now, in terms of paying off things from several years of plots building together and escalating across a bunch of different axes. It's really fun.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly some big things we're going to kind of go over, but obviously we can't get there just yet because we can't jump ahead because I'm watching this in real time. Not literally real time, but watching this first, which means we have to talk about a late delivery from Avalon first.
Alright, so the overview. As Sheridan and Ivanova try to gain recognition of the station's new status among the alien governments, a traveler arrives with an unbelievable story-added legend, starring Michael York.
Yes, also known as Basil.
Also known as D'Artagnan, also known as Logan 5, plenty of other...
But I'm gonna know him as Basil.
Yeah, he's one of the Babylon 5's long list of kind of superstar guest stars.
So I'm just gonna come out and just say it that I legit hate this episode.
Yeah, I don't think it's good.
It's not good. It's basically, as it was mentioned off podcast, it's a King Arthur pastiche masquerading as, I guess, like a PTSD narrative, but it just feels... It's one of those moments when the show makes an episode that feels very much like we needed an episode to fill this slot, but we didn't want to write anything that really connected well with anything else, which I think it just makes it feel like an episode you could skip and not really miss anything important. And that I found very frustrating. I also just kind of like, there were some cute moments, but like the bit with Jakar and our King Arthur, I guess we're going to call it. It's not really his name. Like there were some cute bits in that were kind of fun, but then you kind of realize just how silly this sequence is. And it just sort of wore thin for me pretty quick, and I just kind of got over it, and I wanted it to be over.
Yeah, this, to me, almost felt like it should have been a season 1 episode.
Yeah.
I agree with you, Mike. It's very light, it's very frothy, it's not really connected to anything meta. It's almost as if this is the episode that you introduce to somebody if you want to start them in season 3 for some random reason, because there's not a lot of connections to anything else, and we get to see who these characters are and what they do, but that's it. There's no lingering consequences, nothing ever really... There's only one tiny bit in this episode that really has any payoff later on, and that's the comment about Morgana Le Fay. And if Sean hasn't watched ahead of the 13 to 17, then he doesn't know what I'm talking about. But Mike, you do.
Yeah, and I think the fact that Arthur gives the sword to Delenn, like, helps set her up for some things that we see in the episodes later in this set. But that's really it. I agree with you, Paul, in terms of how not load-bearing it is.
Yeah, I mean, about the only thing we really get out of this episode that maybe has some importance is just the narrative of the Prometheus and what is behind quote unquote King Arthur's actual story, because it turns out that he isn't King Arthur. Well, shocker. He's actually some sort of battle scarred man who has taken on King Arthur as a way to mask his crimes or fear.
Right.
It's and there's some connection to Delenn because presumably then this character was there when Delenn watched Dukat die. So there's some of that, but for the most part, once we kind of leave it, it all it's gone. It doesn't really come up in the next 4 episodes, even by reference. It just sort of it just withers. It's like a flower that like shows once and then just disappears and dies. It's like buying a flower from Lowe's, right? And you plant it, and for one brief moment it looks like it's gonna really go, and then you realize no, it was tainted before you even bought it, and it just dies on you.
So you're saying it's a corpse flower?
Yeah, right?
Yeah, it's a corpse flower.
Yeah, and the parallelism created between the first fight with the Minbari and the kind of climactic tragedy of Lamort to Arthur, like, okay, yeah, that's a little nice, but it just doesn't stand up for me to all of the rest of the creative work that the series is doing. And
especially at this point.
Yeah, it feels much more like a J. Michael Straczynski gimmick in like watching this and then reading his comics and reading a novel of his and some other things. Like every writer kind of comes back to certain things and they have certain ways that they like to do things. And this to me feels like, oh, this is a Straczynskiism. Not that that's especially bad. I just don't think it really fits too well here.
It is worth noting that apparently Straczynski really liked this episode. So the Lurker's Guide has some choice quotes from JMS himself, where he really sort of waxes lyrical about how much he actually really enjoyed this episode. I get the impression that it's not that he enjoyed the episode itself, but that he had a deep, deep love of Michael York, because half of all the comments by him are just about how much he loves Michael York. And so I think it's really not about whether or not they probably could have had Michael York, like, play a teddy bear, and he probably would have been just fine with that story, too. So, but any case, yeah, but I don't know. Is there anything else to kind of talk about with this one?
Not really. Say, as we pointed out, it is just kind of, well, the only other just thing is about the whole, the Drazi ambassador and the League of Non-Aligned Worlds, but again, yeah, that's not really low bearing either. It just really just sits there kind of like a lump. We probably should just move on.
Yep.
Perfect. All right. Next episode then is Ship of Tears, production number 314. And I'm going to read this one because I really like this episode. So, Bester finds himself at odds with others within the Psi Corps and seeks Sheridan's help, offering information about the Shadows in return. Jakar presses for admission to the Conspiracy of Light. I really like that. Walter Koenig as Bester, Joan McMurtry as Caroline, who will come up a little bit later in the episode. So, yeah, this one I really enjoyed quite a bit. I think mostly because I think at this point I'm kind of a Bester fan. He's so creepy and weird and doesn't behave normal, and I like that they brought him back a few times just so he can sort of mess with our mainline characters by just making them a little uncomfortable. And it is kind of nice that we get a better sense of what his motivations are, because in this episode he effectively joins the cause, but his ultimate goals are obviously completely different. So this is, as quoted in the episode, a great example of like the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And it makes sense in this context because we know just how strong the Shadows really are. They kind of need to pool their resources. This episode also makes it very clear why having Psi Corps people involved is kind of essential. And I will let one of you talk about why it matters, because I could go on and on about how much I love this episode.
Yeah, I wanted to touch on Bester stuff. Just real quick, I've been thinking about how Bester serves as kind of the Psi-Cop character or the Psi Corps character, and how he is able to be more nuanced. One, because he shows up several times throughout the series, and the world has changed, and so he's reacting to it. So that's one version of how it's good writing, but he also exists in contrast to both of the other kind of house telepaths that Babylon 5 has had over the years. And so in another story, you'd have somebody like Bester who would be the one guy who's the representative of psychics and Psychor, and it would be harder for him to be both a archetypal psychop and this character that is at opposition with the system that he's a part of if there weren't other people in that system that had been established in the Ironheart episode or in the other episodes with the different telepaths in the world. So the team has done a good enough job of depicting several telepaths so that Bester can be kind of this oddity where he is very much a psychop through and through, but he has these variations from Dogma and from what you expect, even based on his past performances. And I think that's down to the performance by Koenig and down to the writing.
I agree completely. I mean, he is the face of Psychor, but it could have been left at that. But we have enough breadth of telepaths in and out of Psychor to allow him to have growth to do something much more than just be, he's the psychop, capital T, capital P, and that's it. I mean, he gets humanized is not quite the right word. We get to see, I think we get to see dimensions of who and what he is and what he wants in several axes in this episode. What he wants for the telepaths in the future. He wants them to be on top. He's kind of a species, as he clearly thinks that the telepaths are the future. But on the other hand, he cares deeply about a woman that he caught being a blip, and he felt for her. It's like, that's the most human thing on the planet. I mean, for all his protestations, saying, I'm a telepath, I'm better than you normals, he's acting in a very human manner that we can understand and appreciate. He fell for the woman he was supposed to capture and turn to the core. This episode, when I first saw it years ago, amazed me. Like, oh my God, he has a heart.
Yeah, it's a nice touch because, kind of going off of what, Mike, you were saying about his character, that part of what's so great about getting more and more of him, even just like an episode here or there, is we recognize that he's not a main character and that he is part of plots that perhaps are not that essential to the main plot line, but they are of interest. It does mean then that he becomes this much more nuanced figure who does have these sort of very complicated motivations. He isn't just the creepy psychop who just shows up and makes everyone uncomfortable as a demonstration of power. He has things going on that make even, I think, our characters to some degree kind of recognize that, he is a person. He isn't just this guy who just invades people's privacy and makes their lives uncomfortable. He shares more with us than perhaps we realize. And I hope that they also kind of goes the other way, recognizing that they both share things that make them more similar than they perhaps realized before, which perhaps makes why the alliance in this episode feels so much more believable in a way, because that it does feel like, we really do need to kind of work together. And hey, also, we're fighting for very similar things, even if our end goals are slightly different, which in Bester's case appears to be, as Paul was suggesting, basically to rewrite the world and make human sensitives essentially the supreme beings, which, eugenics is always fun, but not necessarily a good thing to bring home for dinner to the kids. So
I mean, we also get some tags back to the fact that there's no telepaths among the Narn, and that's the importance of that. And the general greatest sense of what telepaths are and why they're important in the Babylon 5 universe, not only as them themselves, but to the fight itself. It's like This episode lays down a possible counter to some of the power of the shadows and why they're so afraid. The sign hurts us. We cannot hear the machine. To quote the episode when Carolyn, when Carolyn is very distraught at seeing the sign of the Psychor.
So it's like it's Superman 4 where the Richard Pryor character gets caught up into the big machine, right? It's that one.
The Superman 3.
3?
Yeah, it's hard to tell. They're both terrible movies.
Yeah, it's Superman 3. Trust me.
3 and 4 bleed together for me because like one of them is the one on the dark side of the moon, and one of them is with the giant robot cyborg thing that traumatized me as a 6-year-old or whatever.
They're both terrible, but yeah, they two kind of blend together. Yep.
Yeah, because you get this kind of almost backwards fall into some cyberpunk in terms of human-machine interface and like different manifestations of transhumanism where you have like, oh, okay, well, telepaths are the only ones who can then be hooked up into these machines to be able to create these symbiote fighters or ships that the Shadows are using. And I really like the point of this is how telepaths fit into the meta plot, because in a plot as big as this, having something that really kind of points off in its own direction, if the telepaths weren't connected to the meta plot at all, that might seem a little strange, or there would have to be something else done with it. And I don't think I had thought about that connection in that way before.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting that because I'd mentioned before, right, that this whole plot line with the Psychors is sort of, it was a very secondary line. It affected some characters, but it wasn't, I think, up till now, very overtly affecting our main storyline. And then having it sort of like, it's woven off into its own little place over there, and there's like this stuff going on with the drugs and like all that. And now it's come back and we've got the realization that they actually probably need Bester's Psychor in order to fight the Shadows, because they seem to have perhaps an ability to access a weakness that the Shadows did not want anybody to know about, which is precisely what you're talking about, that the fact that they seem to be using humans as part of an interface for their ships. And that, of course, means that they're susceptible to other people with telekinetic abilities. Or telepathic, not telekinetic, but yeah. Telepathic.
Ironheart was the telekinetic.
Sorry.
And whenever I see this episode, I keep thinking back to what might have been and how Andrea Thompson left the show and Talia Winters got written out. And I think this episode would have been very different had she remained part of Babylon 5. There would have been this episode would have gone very differently. There probably would have been a confrontation between Talia and Bester at some point in this episode about the Psychor and what they're doing. Instead, Leeta's off doing Kosh things, so we don't have any sort of telepath confrontation like we almost certainly would have in the alternate Babylon 5 in an alternate universe where Leeta never came back and we just had Talia all the time as a super powerful telepath.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not to say this is bad, but I mean, we got the show. It's just that would have been a very different way to going about it, and I'm trying to bite my tongue here because I might be revealing stuff for the future, and you'll see what I mean in a few episodes. Maybe
shush, Paul.
What
shush.
I mean.
I literally would not have caught on if you had just been quiet and not mentioned this is connecting to something coming up. You shush.
Okay. Anyway. Yeah, so I like lots of little things in this episode, like for example, Captain Sheridan being savvy enough to see the Omega symbol, and that ties back to his collecting secrets and knowledge, and so knowing not to get anywhere near Bester's sight right from the start. I like the little things of because we've seen telepaths see things from line of sight and explaining, so there's no idiot balls being thrown around here. Sheridan handles Bester very, very smartly, and I appreciate that because it would have been easy to have them all play stupid, and that would have been a lesser show. But Sheridan knows how to handle Bester at this point and handles him well.
And Bester seems to, and this happens right at the start of the episode, and he sort of seems to go with it like in a cat and mouse kind of game, and he's just kind of like talking to them in his normal awkward way, but like, oh, I can't see you. Why don't you come closer, my friend? And it's sort of a little bit fairy tale like trying to coax them in, but they're all just like, yeah, dude, like we know how this game works, but he's still like, come here, little puppets, let's be friends. It is interesting, though, that it starts from them going straight to, we trust you not at all, which, of course, we have good reason not to trust him, to, we still kind of don't trust you, but we trust you slightly more because our interests have aligned somewhat, which is really interesting. And I think part of that is the humanness that this episode gives to Bester.
Yeah, and because if you feel like you've got a pretty good read on somebody and you know not to trust them, then if you feel like you can understand the times when they would or won't betray you and in what way, you can kind of have a loose alliance. And, you know, as I think, Sean, you said earlier on, in a big conflict like this, oftentimes you build a bigger coalition than you expect with people who you have, with whom you have less in common ideologically, but more in common kind of positionally or just a shared enemy. And it's really great to have that nuance.
And that ties into the next episode because our human characters have to learn this idea that like we probably have to find allies in unlikely places, which they've been learning throughout the season, right? Becoming Sheridan becoming friends with Minbari, despite Sheridan kind of being like not really friends with Minbari. So like throughout the whole show, we've had this shift of allies come in unlikely places, and that leads right into the next episode where he's trying to get all these other alien races to kind of be like, okay, you all need to like also like you need to get over your shit and start getting together because we're facing something beyond ourselves. This is sort of like Babylon 5 and Game of Thrones both had their moment. Like the Shadows are the Night King and they're just desperately trying to get all of the other people to like join in and stop being selfish. But it's just really hard and it's complicated and I believe Sheridan even just flat out says that in the next episode, like almost like it's herding cats. But cats who have like huge problems with everyone else and their own agendas that don't align in any obvious way. And it's like puzzle pieces that are misaligned and don't fit together, but somehow you still have to cram them together to make the picture.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So also I would just say that probably the greatest travesty that has happened to the turn of the century into Y2K was that we never got our Bester Garibaldi buddy cop drama / comedy.
Bites tongue.
Shut up. I know there's no show. There is no buddy cop show. They didn't get their own show. They might have got an episode. I want the whole show.
All right. So is that it for this one?
I think so.
Yep. So why don't we move on to the next one? Maybe we'll give that one to you, Mike, if you would like to.
Sure thing. And again, we're using the summaries from Lurker's Guide to Babylon 5, so thank you to them.
Yes.
So this is Interludes and Examinations. Sheridan tries to rally support for his cause as direct confrontations with the Shadows begin in earnest. Friction increases between Londo and Morden. Guest stars Jennifer Balgobin as Dr. Hobbs, Jonathan Chapman as Brakiri, Rance Howard as David Sheridan, and Ed Wasser as Morden. Morden's back! Our favorite asshole!
I hate Morden. Why hasn't he been shanked yet?
Yeah, he is very shankable.
Yes, he
how has nobody figured out that like when he smiles, that's a shit-eating grin. That's not the grin of somebody who really has your interest at heart. Like that's the kind of grin that you like say nice things to, but then when he turns away, you run the hell out the room and get away from him. Because he is up to something.
Because, of course, he's up to big things in this episode, and poor Londo, for lack of a better word, gets played. He gets played hard. By
he
Morden.
really does.
And this episode breaks my heart, because Londo was trying to break away from the Shadows, break away from all that crap, like, you have your side of the galaxy, I have mine, tries to stop the Shadows from manipulating Centauri Prime, and because Morden finds the weakness and manipulates them, they go running back in each other's embrace, as it were. This episode is tragic. And now we were mentioning before before we started, we were talking about prophecy,
right?
And in here's where Londo's burning his burning one of those chances, because running back into the arms of Morden, that's burning one of your chances right here. That's not really much of a spoiler to say that this was not something more Londo should have done whatsoever. I mean, can you blame him? I mean, Morden framed it up that Lord Reefa killed Adira, being motivated by passion and by love. I mean, we saw what happened last episode and how that pushed Buster in directions. Here we're getting Londo being pushed in a very darker, different direction by the death of the only person he loves.
I get it, but I'm still really struggling with... I feel mostly terrible for Adira because she basically doesn't exist in this episode except by flashback.
Yeah.
And then she's just sort of executed.
Yeah.
And fairly obviously by Morden, although obviously he is playing Londo by convincing him it is Rifa, who we saw earlier in the season, that Londo had threatened to poison if Rifa didn't sever his ties with the Shadows. But I still find myself like in this position of just really finding it hard to sympathize with Londo because he keeps doing the things that we're meant to sympathize with are very personal things for Londo, but we never quite see him move to the point of trying to correct his mistakes properly. So even when he severs his ties with the Shadows, it is not to say, oh, I've made a mistake and I shouldn't have got involved and now look what I've done and now I need to try to fix it. It's rather to go, I'm just going to make sure it doesn't affect me at all by severing, like creating a line. You guys hang out over there and we'll hang out over here. And this is sort of like all of the people that I really feel bad for, like the people around him who are going to suffer because he is making horrific mistakes. Rifa I don't much care about because Rifa is evil. I mean, he's just like Londo. Like they're conniving and they manipulate and they probably like want to go back to the old days when everyone just poisons each other and like peas in everybody's cereal. But it is really unfortunate that we're just constantly shown that Londo's decisions affect lots of other people, but it doesn't appear that he ever stops for a moment to think that maybe I'm the one causing this, and I should stop. This is something that happens in Jakar's storyline when he realizes in a different way that I need to change my perspective and change how I address things because I'm not being productive. It seems to me that Londo's whole storyline, and I think the next episodes make that fairly clear, is just a long tragedy of a man refusing to admit his own faults until it's too late and it doesn't matter anymore. But maybe that's my reading of that, and maybe it's just that I've watched too much Game of Thrones. I don't know.
No, I think the Londo is very much set up on a tragic arc, and there's ups and downs, and there's the dramatic irony of when the Emperor is going to kind of try to set things right and then dies and all of that. And I think Mollari is, for me, a character who my heart goes out to him without excusing anything that he does. Like I feel like as an audience member, I spend enough time with him to know why he's feeling as intensely as he does and the motivation that comes behind these bad decisions. Without excusing any of them. And Adira is just fridged, and it's crappy. And especially because the show just does not actually have that many women on it.
Yeah, I mean, a Babylon 5 done today would, should, and must do better than what we get here. As you pointed out, Sean, she's not even seen in this episode. We just get a body and we have flashbacks, and that's it.
Yeah, so all the filming from this is from previous episodes. It's not... I don't even know if they use like her for the body. My guess would be no, because I don't think we ever see her face. So they just got like an extra to like, please sit under this sheet for an hour.
That is kind of weak. But there are other interesting things in this episode besides Londo. Dr. Franklin comes to a conclusion that and he basically resigns as the head of MedLab because he's driven to recognize the problem he has with stems that Garibaldi's been pushing him to try to recognize and starts taking action towards for a number of episodes now. And that's important. So Franklin's got to basically deal with his crap. This episode marks that first step. And then, although you wouldn't recognize it at the time, probably, but this episode is important because this is the inauguration of the Babylon 5 Treaty, where we get these races to finally work together. This is a key point in all Babylon history, that these races finally come together. This is something that is going to last much longer than just a fight against the shadows. This is a turning point in galactic history that happens, and it's because Sheridan feels that he needs more than just the Minbari to protect Babylon 5 and to try to grapple with the shadows. So he rolls up his sleeves and he gets them to work with each other, but at the cost of losing Kosh.
Yeah, because he confronts Kosh, and
yes, that's a great scene.
It's really interesting because Kosh has always been this character where he speaks cryptically, or it. I don't know if Kosh is a he. Vorlons might be genderless. I don't even know. That all the Vorlons just seem to say things, but they never quite say exactly directly, right? And we've seen this throughout the whole season. And even in this moment when Sheridan is like aggressively confronting him and saying, like, you need to get off of your asses and help us because we cannot do this. We don't have the power. You're one of the oldest races. You surely have the power that you could help. And Kosh is just saying, like, it's not right, it's not right. And what we learn at the end of the episode is, well, he's perhaps speaking in terms of his own life, that if he gets involved, he will die. But of course, Sheridan doesn't realize that until after Kosh is dead. So it's one more of those moments where you have a character saying like one thing and Kosh saying something cryptic that seems like he's saying something else, and then by the end we realize it meant something else entirely. And it's also one of the few moments when we friggin' know what a Vorlon actually was saying the whole damn time, which never happens, because I think the rest of the time, like, Vorlons are just giving us like pea soup recipes and we don't even realize it. They probably make great pea soup though.
Simmer for 20 minutes.
But he wouldn't say that. He would say something like wet them in the moonlight of 1,000 suns and then wait. Like he would just say something like weird, and you would just be like, what the hell are you talking about? And then at the end of the season he would say peas.
I think this is where I'm going to start Googling to see if someone has already done Vorlon ASMR on YouTube, and maybe I will have my new job.
Oh no, that's hilarious.
Oh gosh. Oh, I'm sorry, and someone else go, because I don't have anything else to say. I'm just really stuck on, like, Vorlon pea soup recipe.
Yeah, like, there's a lot in this, and it comes out of and leads into everything else. So it's not as much a standalone episode as just like a flashpoint or inflection point across the series. You know, it's definitely cool to see the Vorlon ships unload and to see the shadows kind of be weak in a moment. And it's definitely a kind of a rallying cry, hope giver, not just for the different species that are joining the Babylon treaty / alliance, but also kind of the audience members. If you got to that episode and were worried about humanity being able to pull this off.
I'm still worried, to be honest.
Yeah, there's plenty more to go through, and I'm not going to say a word in that direction. We'll let you discover that for yourself, Sean. But
yeah, I mean, it is very much we have, like, this feels very much like one of those, like, the small victory in the larger pot, where we'll get some downs as a result of this, but it feels really significant because it's like the first momentum in the right direction. But still, there's this sense of, like, we can't just, like, call the Vorlons every week and be like, hey, dudes, could you guys go blow some ships up with your pea soup recipes? It all just sort of has to rely on everybody working together, and it still feels like we're trying to get all of these people together, and they'll join a little bit, but it doesn't feel there yet. It still feels so tentative, and like something can happen and shatter it all.
Yeah.
Yep, and for the second time in the Babylon 5 arc, Kosh gets attacked, and this time it sticks and he dies. The plot of The Gathering. Have you seen The Gathering, Sean?
No, I've seen in the beginning.
Okay, no, so you see, The Gathering is the very first pilot, which basically, I mean, the cast is a little different. It's set before the first season, and just as a slight spoiler, the plot revolves around an attempted assassination of Kosh. I won't say by who or why, but
okay, yeah, I haven't seen it.
Someone tries to kill Kosh, but yeah, it doesn't work, obviously, because we see Kosh until now. But yeah, this time Kosh goes down. and Gordon creepily just watching it all as the shadows tear him apart. Ugh. A war zone is what Ivanova describes it.
Well, I feel like we can move to the next episode.
The two-parter.
Two-parter.
War Without End.
And we're going to talk about them together rather than separate because they're just...
It's really just 2 hours of one of the key episodes of the series. Ambassador Sinclair returns to pull Babylon 4 through time.
Dun, dun, dun!
So yeah, and this one kind of calls back to and kind of reuses clips from Babylon Squared, which was season 1, and sets up a lot of stuff in the immediate term and a lot of or a not small amount of the actual series cosmology of wait, so where does the whole Minbari souls, human souls thing come from? Who's Valen? All of that, just bam, 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 bam in this episode.
Yep, we get the revelations. It's Sinclair will be Valen all along. The souls thing, that was started by him changing 1,000 years ago, and basically when Delenn changed, that kind of rebalanced everything back to the beginning. He sends a letter to himself there, so there's time travel loops of all kinds going on this episode, closed time loops and trying to avoid paradoxes. I mean, I love when he meets Zathras and says, you can't change anything to change my future, so you can't recognize me. And Zathras, and now we can see why Zathras acted so weird in Babylon Squared, because that's the way, he was told to do that. So that also nicely ties in. The weird thing for this episode I kept seeing and thinking about was the whole Garibaldi flash to alternate present thing. And I can't quite, maybe Mike, you're better off at this, figure out where that was supposed to be in the timeline that never was, that Garibaldi would be on a Babylon ship, a Babylon station, basically as a rearguard action, but Sinclair getting away because, by comparison, because we see the flash forwards into Ivanova saying, well, Babylon 5 is going to be destroyed, but she says the captain's dead. But in that gray flash, Sinclair's getting off the station, and Garibaldi's left behind. I can't decide what that flash alternate present of Garibaldi we see, where he's making that heroic doomed last stand, is supposed to be.
Isn't that I viewed that as the flash that either Sinclair sees or knows would happen if he let Garibaldi come with him, or it's just another part of the same dark possible future.
Yeah, where Sinclair is still captain. It seems like a very weird way to keep Garibaldi mostly out of the action, which makes sense because we see Sinclair aging, so that makes sense. We lose Garibaldi along with Sinclair, but that whole flash thing, it bothered me a couple of times, and watching this again, it's that just doesn't feel right of a piece with everything else. I couldn't figure out where it would actually sit.
When you try to square a circle with a time travel episode, when you've had to change the cast, the lead character, you're kind of just screwed.
Yeah, I suppose you're right. Yeah, that's where we're getting into this whole issue. Yeah, possibly. So, but Sean, what did you think of this episode?
So, well, we do have the return of a familiar character, and I as I recall, I was very sad when this character left because Sinclair comes back.
I did tell you he would come back, and here he is.
I know, and you need to stop spoiling things for me, Paul. Bad. I
want to make you happy that he was going to return. But
you can never bring me happiness. Only Kosh can bring me happiness.
Well, Kosh is dead, so he can't bring you happiness.
For now. You never know. So anyway, but I was really excited to see Sinclair come back, but I was also a little bit saddened because I know why the actor, O'Hare basically left, and we've talked about it before. He was suffering very severe mental issues, including things like delusions and stuff. And in the first season, he left because he basically quietly left. And then when he died, Straczynski revealed why, because basically he had been sworn to secrecy until O'Hare's death. But yeah, so he had suffered from some very severe mental health problems and was unable to continue. And then he came back for this, but you can really tell that he's not quite the same. And I think for the most part it works just because he's been on Minbar for all this time, and I feel like the Minbari just they make people a little bit off from what we expect for humans.
Or in general, look at Veer.
Yeah, I think so. There is a sense that it just, you could tell that
it's like going to Fairyland.
It is kind of like going Fairyland, but you could still kind of tell that the actor was not he really wasn't in his top form. He does mostly a fairly serviceable job with what he's given, which I think is important to recognize because this is basically the end of his acting career. I don't recall if he does much after this point, but pretty soon after he flat out retires, and then he passes in, I believe, 2012. I passed away. I believe he died of a heart attack and went into a coma. Very, very sad. And then we kind of found out. So it was really nice to see him return, but also really sad because I know that he's just gone. And they do, I think, a good serviceable ending for his character of giving him some sort of closure for the character, which I think is, I really appreciate that quite a lot, because a lot of times shows just sort of like write characters off and don't quite give them a reasonable ending. And Sinclair's ending feels appropriate here. It feels like a sufficient ending for his character.
Okay, that's fair.
Other than that, I also enjoyed the episodes, even though I generally hate time travel stuff, because they tend to not make a lot of sense. But for the most part, I thought that it did mostly put all the pieces together, which is kind of impressive, actually.
Yeah, because having another episode that you have to line up with is both an advantage and a disadvantage when you're doing something time travel-y. Like, as I mentioned earlier, maybe the scene with Garibaldi and the big gun doesn't actually make any sense because of the cast change, but you had some pieces on the board already from the Babylon Squared episode that then they could write toward, instead of, okay, we need to create the scenario and resolve the scenario all in the same amount of time. Like, okay, well now we're basically doing parts 2 and 3 of a 3-parter.
Yeah, and it does work. We get to see the backstory into Babylon Squared as to what was happening, why it was happening, and as you said, Mike, they could write towards that and connect the dots as best they can. And that I have to talk. And yes, this is the Zathras Glory episode. This is why Zathras gets so many memes, why Zathras is great, and why Zathras' life has symmetry. I love Zathras. Zathras is a alien character, but he's straightforward and twisty at the same time. He's also 110 years old, so he's a little eccentric.
You do realize who he is, right? You all have seen Neverending Story, the movie, right?
Yes.
You know the little old man who studies the Sphinxes all the time?
Yeah.
That's Zathras.
It's the same actor? Really?
No, it's not the same actor, Paul. I'm just saying that they're eerily alike, and so I'm just, in my head canon, they're the same person. He went back in time, but ended up in Fantasia Land, or whatever that land is called, I can't remember, and that's him. And then he just spends the rest of his life like being a kooky scientist.
It's been too long since I've seen the movie for me to be able to evaluate that take.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember the movie, and I'm not really grabbing that take, Sean. No offense.
Jen will understand it, and she will leave this in here for her own enjoyment.
That's fair.
That's fair and fine. But yeah, so poor Zathras gets. We saw him in Babylon Square. We get to see him, and he winds up riding into the past with Sinclair for, we don't know how long he lives on Babylon 4 with him in that Shadow War, but because he's already 110 years old. But you know, he does not get the death he thought he was going to get. He says like, "I'll probably sad death." He doesn't. At least we don't see it on screen anyway. He clearly helps Sheridan / Valen in 1,000-year-old Shadow War, and that's all good.
Speaking of possible spin-off shows that didn't get to happen, it's the Babylon 4 show set in the previous Shadow War and the establishment of the Grey Council and so on.
Yeah, how that all came to be, because Valen defeats the Shadows, he swamps the Grey Council, he revolutionizes Minbar, and he is the closed circle. I mean, we get another Vorlon here talking in cryptic circles, like he's the closed circle. He's returning to the beginning, and the Minbar says, the beginning of what? And he doesn't get an answer because, of course not. Because
he just walks away
because he's such a Vorlon.
But I do appreciate that we learn who Valen is, and it fits in all of this prophecy stuff, because there's Valen was a Minbar,
not born of Minbar,
born of Minbar, and all of this stuff. And it turns out, oh yeah, so all it did was that Sinclair took the little morphing device that we saw Delenn use to sort of make herself somewhat more human, and he just did it the opposite direction. And that great sequence at the very end when he's just standing there as the Minbaris show up and Zathras is ushering him over, and there are the Vorlons and him, and he's just like, hey, brought a gift for you, what up, boys? And it's kind of hard to take that scene in and not be like, this guy might be important. I don't know. So yeah, so it's pretty cool. It's a pretty cool way to end it, and I love that that's how his character goes out, is he doesn't just disappear and get killed off or anything like that. He gets to be absolutely crucial to the history of an entire people.
He is the one who was, just as Delenn is the one who is, and Sharon is the one who will be. Just like we are three.
Yep, and I also was reminded of how much I love the jump forward in time to something that you only sort of understand, but fits in while also raising other questions. Like, why is Jakar there at the end with Londo? What's with the Keepers? What was Veer doing?
What happened? What happened to Jakar's eye?
Yeah, what happens to Delenn after this? What's up with their kid? They have a kid.
What the hell?
That made me so happy. That little moment, I was like, oh, my little romance story is coming true.
Yes, wait, now you have the weird asymmetry. You get the two senses of asymmetry of that romance, because poor Sheridan has no clue when he's catapulted in the future that they've had this whole history together. And when he goes back to the past and he looks at Delenn, he doesn't quite know what to do because now he has the information that Delenn doesn't have. It's a nice little use of time travel to add some tension to that romance. And then we get, of course, we get the weird flash forward of Delenn and the dropped ball and the voice and the mysterious voice, capital M, capital V. I'm not going to tell you who that is, but we will find out. We will find out who that voice is.
I really dig that segment of okay, we've got time travel. So what one juicy glimpse of the future do we want to use? Because I think I can remember or think of some other narratives where you have more jumping back and forth in time with this kind of unstuck in time premise.
Yeah, Billy Pilgrim.
Yeah, I think the more you do it, the less each segment has in terms of emotional impact, or the less it can. You have to work really hard to make them all stand on their own. So I think going forward to a kind of Pyrrhic victory, only sort of dark but still not all the way good future is a really cool move that suggests the kind of the weight and the gravity of what is to come.
Yeah.
There's a lot of history yet to come, and it's not going to be a smooth path. But your comment about jumping in time, Mike, makes me think of the end of season 4, that episode. It's
been a while, so I think we'll just leave it there.
Okay, we'll leave that there. Leave that there.
God, Paul, just I'm gonna see you very soon, and I'm bringing a rolled up newspaper.
So, do we have anything else for these episodes?
I don't know if there's much else to discuss. I mean, the plot wise, it despite being a time travel narrative, it's fairly direct. And while there's obviously very specific things for the characters, we've kind of covered all of that. It just feels it feels like we've kind of wrapped it up, and now I just want to know what's coming next. But I do want to read a line that has absolutely no context, but was said by Straczynski about these episodes.
Okay.
And I would just like to leave us there if that would be appropriate. The line is as follows. I don't believe anyone on Minbar was wearing shorts. It's not the season for that. Just leave it there.
Okay.
There's absolutely no context to this quote. It just exists. I don't know what the question is. I'm sure the computer from Hitchhiker's Guide could spend 10 million years building it, but there you go. So, not the season for shorts on Minbar, guys. Just thought you should know.
Well, that's going to ruin all my cosplay.
Dang, that sucks. So, it's not like they ever wear shorts. Maybe they do. I don't know. I've never been to Minbar. This is one of the first times I've been to Minbar proper.
This is another thwarted spinoff, is the Project Runway Minbar edition.
Or the Met Gala Minbar edition.
Right?
The Met Gala
Those
is
pictures
tonight.
are amazing.
Yeah. As we're recording this, listeners, tonight is the Met Gala, and the pictures are amazing of the costumes as always.
If the world is remotely just, there will be a write-up by Genevieve Valentine tomorrow, so it should be out by the time y'all see this. So look that up, and hopefully that will be a thing.
Well, that sounds delightful. So hopefully you guys will go back in time and look at that stuff, because I don't know exactly when this episode comes out. But for all we know, it could be when the next Met Gala happens.
Ooh, Met Gala squared.
And you'll never know which one we're referring to. Ooh, yeah, spooky. Anyway, that's just silly. All right, well, thank you, Paul. Thank you, Mike, for yet another riveting episode of Babylon 5 Rewatch. This was fantastic.
All right, I think we're going to finish up the season next time, right?
Yeah, we're almost done. And then we get into the season 4, and then season 5, and then movies. Tons of movies.
So listen to the last 5 episodes of the season, or watch the last 5 episodes of the season if you want to keep pace with us, and hit us up on social and all of those good places if you want to yell at us about things you loved or hated or whatever in the series.
Absolutely. I mean, people are still, like Sean, are still discovering the show, and that warms my heart that even after 20 years that people can still find joy in the show for the first time. And I get joy not only rewatching it, but seeing Sean's joy, even if I spoil slightly.
Well, I'm glad I'm warming your heart, because I have been waiting to harvest it for quite a while.
It's a long game.
It's a long game. And I guess on that note, we should say goodbye. So, awkward ending and scene. If you would like to support this show, you can go to patreon.com/SkiffyandFanty, or find us on Twitter @SkiffyandFanty, our webpage, SkiffyandFanty.com, or you can even send us an email at SkiffyandFanty@gmail.com. The intro music for this podcast was taken from Rock Thing by Creo. You can find out more about their music on freemusicarchive.org.